Let me see if I can spotlight myself. Just one moment. There we go. Perfect. I don't know what just happened. There we go. All right, I think we're good to go. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time again to
Hey,
meet with us.
Laura, I've been here as Pat for some reason.
I'm sorry.
Laura, can you hear me?
Now I can, yes, but I don't know who's talking. You want to repeat yourself? Are we all good? Can
Hi,
everyone hear?
Laura. I can hear you fine. This is Sam Matthias from Mave. I think Mary Pat Fannin from Pazam was having some internet issues, but should join in a second. I'll
Okay, I
go back
think
to
I
you.
see her on. Or did I
Laura,
just?
Laura,
Yes. All right, I'll.
Laura, this is Pam Ortiz. My sign-in says Mary Pat Fannin. I don't know why. And my invitation says that also.
Okay.
I'm, this is Pam Ortiz of the judiciary. I have to be on my phone with my camera off today. I apologize.
No problem. The connection is a little delayed, but I think I got the gist of what you were trying to say. We'll figure out if we can rename you or why you are or showing up as Mary Pat. That is odd. Um, Hannah, if you by any chance, maybe I don't know if that's something you could look through on this end, or
Yeah,
Ursula,
so
but
I will work with Shirla and Diamond, who I see are on here, and Tanea, and we'll figure out a solution to
thank
get her
you.
renamed.
Thank you. All right. Let me jump back in. Thank you all so much again for your time, for your willingness to be a part of this work group. As we've mentioned before, we don't take lightly how much of an undertaking this is, how much work has been put into the Sign Language Interpreter Act to date, and how much work this it will continue to take. So we wanted to thank you all again. And then also wanted to start off today just addressing some concerns off the top. Um, we want to make sure that everyone sort of is coming into this with the understanding that the process that we are undergoing right now of forming this informal work group
I'm sorry
and
for interrupting, but can you please can you unpin Ursula, please? Unspotlight. Oh, unspotlight Hannah.
alrighty, good to go. Okay, so um, lost my train of thought. We're not throwing out the work that has been done. We are not trying to disregard all of the work and effort that has been put into the legislation so far. But we do want you all to feel comfortable knowing that this is a process that happens frequently. Often, when legislation moves from legislation to reality to implementation, you identify some issues that you may not have even realized needed to be addressed in the beginning. So now that this is moving from legislation on paper to being something that needs to be implemented, this has, brought us together for a conversation about how we can figure out how we can land in a place with this legislation that is operational, that is functional, that serves the very, very, very important purpose of providing quality sign language interpreters to those who need it. So just wanted to, set that out at the top and make sure that you all know that this is intended to bring us together to move forward, not to disregard any work that has been put into the legislation to date. And we hope that we all can be committed to a path forward here. We recognize that, there's a lot of decisions a lot of suggestions, a lot of proposals, a lot of decisions that could be made, but we don't want this to be an overhaul of the legislation. And so we don't intend to make every suggestion a decision point, right? I think we'll move on a consensus basis, and hopefully by sharing concerns together in this group, we can, come to a final decision. Another flag that we wanted to discuss also in the last meeting, it was raised about potentially doing anonymous voting. And so we think in the interest of making this a very public and transparent process, we think it would be better if we do public voting. And so that way it is clear who voted for what and who lands where. Because this is an informal process, we still want to make sure that we're doing this in a way that the community at a larger scale feels they have insight and visibility into the process and visibility into decision making. So feel free again to reach out via email if you have any concerns about that. We can discuss further, but just wanted to share that at the top as well. So for today's meeting, we are discussing consumer choice and licensure requirements. We recognize that these are loaded sections, and we have a lot of proposals that you all have seen. We don't need to vote on anything today. This can just be a discussion, but wanted to make sure that we carved out designated time for all of the issue areas. So to start, I wanted to see if any members of the board that are on the work group would like to open us up and share a bit about sort of we'll start with consumer choice. We'll dedicate some time to that, and then we'll discuss the licensure requirements. But if someone from the board wants to share a little bit about where the legislation lands on consumer choice and sort of where the discussions you all had up until this point, and then we'll jump into the rest of the group for folks to share their proposals. So I don't know if if Bill or Leslie, or it looks like Bill has his hand raised. So Bill, feel free to start.
Good morning. Okay, sorry, it was a little freezing there. Thank you so much for all those comments and clarifications. So we do have two other issues that have not yet been discussed or raised. The first is I really want to hear directly from the governor, their concerns. I feel like, we're working a little bit in the dark. We're like hoping that we're going to give it to the governor and then he's going to accept it. But we don't know if there's specific concerns, if there seems to be some vagueness. And the governor said, you know, he wants specific things and he wants a specific list of concerns. And also, we want, have a balance of the impact on the community and the representation in this group. So when you're talking about the governor's view, I'm just curious about that. And I want to make clear for Crystal that I want to make it crystal clear, sorry, that the representation in this group is something that I really want to talk about, and I want the governor's view on how to move forward. And at the same time, we don't want to have any kind of inappropriate can you go back and clarify what you meant by representation? The interpreter did not get that correctly.
The disproportionate representation percentage of
Oh, the
this group.
percentage of this group. Okay. We have a very small amount of deaf people and a huge amount of hearing people. It's people who are doing the oppression. We have a lot of them here. And then those who experience the oppression, there's not many of us here. So I wanted to make sure that that interpretation was a little bit more clear. Okay. Laura, Hannah, feel free. Thank you so much.
Thank you so Thank you so much, Bill. Appreciate your comments. As far as hearing from the governor, so there, myself, Hannah, there are other folks on this call that are here on behalf of the governor as representatives of the governor's office. And so I think any discussions that we are having in this group can be, understood as um, us communicating on behalf of the governor's interests, right? And so that is where I think any clarity or that you're seeking around where the governor lands is can be sort of ascertained through us as representatives of his office. Um, the purpose of this group, as we have maintained, is to make sure that we end with a licensure system program that is functional, that is operational. And so the governor's support for licensure has not changed. No one in this office has, wavered on that position. It is just a matter of making sure that whatever is produced is operational. So that is in regards to where the governor lands on this issue or any vagueness from the governor. Myself, Hannah, and other folks on this call that are from the governor's office are here, representing that sentiment. As far as group representation, the membership for this group has been set and established. We, wanted to strike a balance of folks that are impacted and folks that are going to be tasked with implementing. As I mentioned in the beginning, there is a lot that happens in the middle between legislation and it being implemented and it being actionable. And so it has been important for us to make sure that we balance the needs of the community and have input from the community, but also from the folks that will be tasked with implementing it. So, in very specific settings, right? An educational setting is different from a judicial setting, which is different than a hospital setting. And so that is where the thinking behind the group membership came from. And so, these meetings continue to be open for the public to view, to share their comments and input, and we continue to welcome them and, want you all to feel confident that there is, the only intent here is to make sure that we end with licensure that serves the needs of the deaf community and is implementable and actionable and is something that all of these folks in these different settings are actually going to be able to put forward. All righty. Leslie, your hand is up next.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much. I'm on behalf of, I'm sorry, you're freezing a bit, of the board. So we do have someone on the panelist who switched, I'm sorry,
Dave Quinn.
David Quinn. Oh, he's in session now, but he's definitely part of this panel. Bradford, can you take this one?
Sure, go ahead, Leslie.
You can turn your camera.
Okay, and so Dave Coyne is actually in attendance, uh, but he actually should be in the panel. So just an FYI for whoever is the admin for this meeting. Okay, and so in regards to the board, in regards to consumer preferences, so we already know that the law indicates that the board is able to provide specifications in terms of how consumers make those choices. And so the board did go ahead and write that into the law, and that is from AAG. from Ethan specifically. And so Ethan himself had indicated that he had provided the language that had already been reviewed. And so right after the first public comment period, actually 30 days, actually technically close to 60 days here now. However, we collected all those comments we heard specifically from people such as Jason Conrad, from Frederick Health, and also MHA and also judicial as well. And so the consumer choice, they wanted to see what the challenges were, especially within the rural areas. And so the board did review that feedback, and it changed from VRI usage from a 1 hour max to up to 3 hours. Okay. And also, if you take a look at the language that I had provided from our current regs under point zero eight consumer choice, the look at specifically letter C. It says that if the requester doesn't request one type of service and the consumer prefers one other type, the interpreter or the agency shall not provide sign language interpreting services unless the consumer agrees to accept the service offer. Okay, and so from my understanding, and also from the interpretation in terms of how the board had voted, that language does meet what the MHA, judicial, as well as what Jason Conrad had already proposed. And so essentially that is the board's update.
Thank you, Leslie. The next hand up, I believe Tina.
I think Betty was next.
Okay, Betty.
Good afternoon. I'm going to speak. I want to just clarify something with you, Laura, because you made a point of saying that we can be assured that your what representation is reflective of the governor. So I want to clarify that a little bit. So are you saying that if the governor had a task force or a group of people working on women's health issues in Maryland, that he would be fine with having 18 people in a group and 5 people be women and 13 people be men making decisions about women's health care? Is that what you're saying?
So sorry about that. Laura and I are playing tag on, but I'm happy to back up Laura's statement earlier. We have several members from the governor's office involved in this work group and the decisions that we're making here. So again, we're like, as an administration, we're very involved in the decisions that have made to this point. The membership of the work group has already been decided. And at this point, we're about 20 minutes into our hour-long meeting. I want to be respectful of everyone's time and turn it back over to Laura to make sure we have some conversation on the topics that at the last meeting we decided we would be discussing today.
So this is your answer to my question?
Yes.
So I should contact the governor and ask him if he would support such a configuration of people who are well outnumbered by people who have nothing to do with the real issues here, except for
So
pay.
this is again, and I understand that everyone may not be happy with the decisions that have been made to this point. But we are, in putting together the work group, we wanted to ensure that there was representation from the deaf community, the interpreters, and the implementing agencies, as well as members of the board. And so that is the representation of the work group.
Hey,
All right. So to continue, again, as Hannah said, we are now 20 minutes into the meeting, so we want to make sure that we really get through the substance and get to talk about the topic at hand. So Tina, if you have anything that you want to share about consumer choice, we've heard of different things related to waivers and potentially, different configurations that might work in this case. So would love to hear your thoughts on consumer choice.
Okay, and so consumer choice is really just important for the deaf community. And so for many years, hearing people have made decisions for us, and this is time for that to stop right now. We make the decisions ourselves, and we make those choices we want, whether it be with interpreters or VRI, doesn't matter, but allow us to make those decisions and don't decide for us, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Anyone else that would like to? Oh, Megan.
Okay, and hi there, good afternoon. My name is Megan, and I am a deaf interpreter myself. In terms of consumer choice, I do have a few questions about that. So, how is it that the deaf users in the state of Maryland are going to know where to find information and also the ability to access these specific requests for interpreters? And also, what mode or service or technology is this going to be in person? So where would all this be? Would this be housed in one website, or would all the interpreting agencies be required to provide this information and have this available? And also, in terms of a time limit, 24 hours prior to or up to 24 hours, I think it should be 24 hours. That might be more fair for the users because they might make that request and not get what they need. So the concern is that, I'm sorry, let me back up. Leslie had mentioned in terms of letter C. My concern is about that because there's a loophole. So they could say, hey, this is what we have available. But how do we actually you know, they actually provide their specific services being requested. So essentially, they could feel that their arms are twisted, and we need this service now. So that's my concerns and how this service is delivered. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And I see Leslie has her hand up.
Okay, and thank you, Megan. And that is a great point. And that was a struggle that the board had had. And also, based on many concerns, such as MHA, uh, their recommendations, they said yes, they are compliant by law with the ADA. They provide access. Okay, but that coincides with the fact that what happens if they're not able to provide the service in person? And so that was something that was suggested by Jason Conrad as well as MHA. And I would ask Jason to clarify if I'm mistaken in terms of speaking to his point, but after several conversations with him and MHA and different justices, that in terms of Part C, you are correct. The business already has a doctor's appointment and they say, oh, well, we tried and we tried. Actually, they don't try because I have seen many other individuals, deaf friends and other interpreters as well, text me directly stating that there was no availability when in fact there is availability. But this is a quote unquote loophole that doesn't, meet, you know, they wanted to make sure that they don't have a lawsuit when it comes to not providing services. So that is a challenge.
Jason?
Okay, if I'm a bit dark, I apologize. But thank you for that, Leslie, and thank you for mentioning that. Um, you are correct. I did have this discussion. It says that after the bill was passed, okay, now what is it that what is it that we do? That is this discussion. So are we required to provide specific deaf consumers their preferences? If so, okay. So what if something happens, such as we tried to find somebody who's available and there's not anybody who is available. If the interpreter is in fact assigned and they're on their way, they get a flat tire and they're not able to make it. What do we do in that instance? Um, so so in terms of who do we hire as interpreters, and then say we're not in compliance if the interpreter doesn't show up, even though we made that attempt. So essentially, that's where the thought process is. But now we have the opportunity to discuss this. We'll go back to the bill and the legislation. Okay, and I am concerned in regards to one small passage in the legislation of the bill that has a big impact on the deaf community and also impacts the service providers, interpreting agencies, and so on and so forth. Uh, so hopefully you all did read our various proposals, but there is one thing that I wanted to mention for my proposal is that we have 6 pages in regards to how the board is able to provide oversight in terms of ensuring interpreter compliance. If they don't comply, then what do we do? Is there a fine or a penalty, or is the license revoked? So we do have 6 pages if an interpreter is not in compliance. So my proposal is essentially just to go ahead and redact the consumer choice language, but not because I don't think it's important. I do believe it's important, but I don't think that the legislation has enough, say, teeth to be able to ensure that they do in fact provide this. So now with the ADA, we do have outlines in the ADA, and people and businesses and organizations don't necessarily follow those outlines. So are there no teeth? Or are people not willing to go ahead and, say make a complaint or file a suit? I am afraid that we are in the same situation, one without teeth, to where the language is in fact too weak for the deaf community. And so nothing against anybody. I want consumers to be able to have the right to make those choices. However, without those teeth, is it just language? Are we placing ourselves in the same position as the ADA? And so to expound on that, perhaps Leslie from the board might have a plan in terms of how people might be able to, say, file a complaint. Say this organization doesn't comply. What is the process? Do we refer them over to the DOJ? So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And let's jump to Jake Whitaker. Let's just make sure everybody gets a chance to speak before we double back.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And we really appreciate the opportunity to provide the hospital field's perspective. And I just want to start by kind of saying that, and clearly saying that Maryland hospitals, we do our very best to honor patient preferences for in-person or video remote interpretation services. We are just really concerned that a strict consumer choice requirement could be a barrier to healthcare. There's only a few hundred interpreters serving more than 1 million deaf and hard of hearing individuals in Maryland, and that's just based on the last census from a few years ago. We also know that in emergency or in rural areas, waiting for an interpreter can delay care or put our patients' health at serious risk. And we also know that patients can often stay in hospitals for days or even longer. So we also know that we need to continuously communicate with patients about tests, treatments, and changes in their conditions. So allowing a VRI exception, even for just a few hours, may not be enough because we can't get access to those in-person interpreter services sometimes. So even a few hours just will not cover like a whole night, a weekend, and will leave dangerous gaps in communications. So we are asking to amend the statute so that there is explicit language precluding the strict consumer choice requirement. And again, we do support promoting access to the consumer choice. It's just the rigid requirements and the practical realities that they do create that could keep us from providing care. So again, I really appreciate everyone giving us the opportunity to provide the hospital field's perspective. Thank you.
And we've switched interpreters.
Thank you, interpreters. Next will be Megan.
Perfect. Thank you. And to add to that concern, I guess I have two things. The interpreters are talking about the freelance people that are under agencies. It's different than those who are staff interpreters. With MHA or, the schools, how is that going to work? So is it under the district? Who's the contractor? That's my first question. And I guess related to that, when the user's like, oh, yes, I know that interpreter, I'm good. They're licensed, I know. How are they going to know that? And then, thirdly, and last, the deaf interpreters right now are really struggling because of training, the suspension of training, the legal training, the medical interpreter training. How is that going to work? You're having this requirement to have these certifications to be licensed in these different areas within the state of Maryland. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. Now back to Leslie.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that my video was clear and is not freezing. I do know that it's not necessarily just me, but Megan, thank you for bringing that up. I had forgotten to mention that. That's a great point in terms of how deaf consumers would know who was licensed and to know where to be able to find the information. And the consumers, the agencies, the hospitals, doctors' offices, how do they all know who to choose as interpreters? Now, there's already Paul and also GODHH. They will go ahead and develop a portal. Okay, and so this portal essentially will have all the interpreters' names and the names of interpreters reconciled with the licenses that they do have, so that way deaf consumers would be able to use this in a mobile-friendly format, as well as say through a laptop, to be able to find the names and see a picture, as well as their license. And so that is just to ensure that both the deaf consumers, the team interpreters, the agencies, the business owners, or all have the ability to see this information to ensure this individual has a license, and this is where the information will be stored. In regards to Jason, great question in terms of that follow-up. And yes, in fact, we have 6 pages in terms of the penalties, and that is the state language. And I'm sorry, I don't want to say we, the board, okay? The board is allowed to hear complaints for 7 different specific reasons. And those aren't the reasons that the board has developed. They were already established. And so, yes, the board did have a lot of dialogue with AAG. And also, we had a lot of Q&A with the consumers and community in terms of how we would be able to provide trainings in terms of that process to hear those grievances. What are the conclusions and penalties for those? And so the advice from AAG and the board told AAG that the board was not fully comfortable with making decisions because we are not trained. And the AAG had advised us that we could receive training about how to hear these complaints, and also the consumers were able to provide an appeal. And that would essentially just go ahead and raise it up to the hearing office. But you are correct in terms of how we handle this process. Okay. And so that is correct, Jason. And also, if I didn't miss a first name, okay, Jake Thank you from MHA. You are correct, and I am a contractor with a hospital locally. I'm not a staff member. That hospital has a lot of interpreters that are in fact staff, and they also have direct part-time interpreters. And also contracts with several agencies. And I happen to be one of the contractors with one of those agencies. And yes, in the area that I live in, there are a lot of deaf community members that do, in fact, go to that hospital. And probably the deaf consumers might be there perhaps daily or every day. So I do see, oftentimes with doctors' rounds, there are testing. There's blood draws. There's different reasons why a deaf consumer that might need interpreting services would need it in this setting. So it's both inpatient and also I see it in the emergency room setting as well. And Jason brought up a great point in terms of not only can you not sometimes find interpreters in person, but also if some life happens and there's an accident, the interpreter gets a flat tire, or whatever those reasons may be, we want to ensure that the hospital or the doctor's offices aren't necessarily left in a position to where they're non-compliant. And so that is where the board looks to see how much time do they have? So that changed from 1 hour to 3 hours, and perhaps 3 hours might still not be enough to also in person and inpatient. You are correct, and maybe they can't provide, say, 24/7 interpreting services. So that is something that we are looking at, and I know that Jason had brought this up. In terms of the ADA, all the specifics in there, that might be good to overlap with consumer choices and also what the specifics are from the ADA. But Leslie, can you slow down for the interpreter, please? Thank you. Keep going. I'm sorry, this is Leslie. My thought slipped there. Okay, and so with the consumer choice, uh, so that it really has a big impact. And so, yes, there are many businesses and many hospitals that are doing their best to ensure that deaf consumers are heard with an in-person or whether VRI is accepted, but a lot of them are not as well. And so that is where the law is there is to protect the consumers. And so I think that if we are able to figure out what the consumer preferences are, and then also the ADA and sort of merge those together and hopefully be able to meet both of the reasons of why this was put into law. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Jason is next.
Perfect. Okay, good. Thank you so much for that, Leslie. I really appreciate it. I think the blend makes sense of the ADA as well as, the current legislation. I agree. Being able to meet those and put them together, that makes complete sense. Another concern I have is related to is where exactly the law is going to be applied. Some of the examples in my proposal, they were a little ironic, I will admit, but the intention is still there. A hospital, of course, there needs to be something an interpreter provided. In courts, of course. But let's say the consumer goes to McDonald's restaurant and they're standing in line and they say, I'm requesting an in-person interpreter. And they just sit there. The law, to my knowledge, doesn't sound like it has any boundaries or lines of what kind of organizations are included and which are not included. The ADA does say there's a Title III and a Title II, government, public services, public institutions. And we know there are other areas that are outside of those two that the ADA does not apply to. Another concern about that is are all businesses, all organizations, all activities, including restaurants, sports, these different kinds of activities. Is the attention to apply it to all of these areas? Are we just looking at specific kinds of areas? For example, hospitals, doctors' offices, educational settings, court settings. and the like are high risk. And the law is written right now, it says all. And I'm definitely concerned about that.
Thank you so much. Next will be Caitlin, and then we'll go to Bill.
My camera doesn't want to turn on of some reason, but can you hear me? It says it's locked.
Yes.
Okay, I will speak. So thank you for the time. I also would like to thank the board for all of the work that they have done so far. They have been absolutely doing a lot to listen to everybody and make some of these changes. I also hope that everyone can see that this here is an opportunity to also make some of those changes, maybe in a more permanent way, or maybe in a faster way, even since we've been going through these discussions for a while. Next, I want to point out that as for my proposal that I submitted, I proposed to do away with a lot of the language involving even requiring certification for interpreters, or the language requiring or allowing for the development of sub-licenses in various categories, because one problem that we can't make go away with this law is the interpreter shortage. The interpreter shortage will continue, and we will continue to have problems trying to apply these very specific regulations and pieces of the law in a situation that is very broad. The way I see it, the diversity in the deaf community has not even been addressed. A lot of the parts of the law are excellent for an ASL user of interpreters, but they don't consider the diversity in the deaf community that involves sign-supported speech or using signed English, for which there are many interpreters, certified or not, who are a great fit and who those deaf people would select over an ASL fluent or certified interpreter. So I don't feel like their voice or their representation is necessarily getting in here either. So there's all of this diversity in the consumer group of deaf people. And then there's also diversity in the settings. Here we're talking about emergency settings like an emergency doctor's visit. But then I didn't even realize until reading the proposal from Maryland courts about how many emergency hearings, for example, for custody that might come into play, where the urgency of the matter, I think, supersedes the preference for in-person versus VRI. So to me, the question as we consider these regulations is, are we going to try to endlessly regulate for every circumstance that might come to be? Or is there a way that we can step back and make the law more broad, just providing the teeth, as we've been talking about, necessary to say that if someone violates those 7 things, there will be consequences. Deaf people will have recourse when they are receiving harm. But right now, and as it is written, all of this recourse is targeted at interpreters, when also, as Bill was saying, that hospitals, courts, and school systems are perpetrators of not providing interpreters when they should or when they could. So systems need to be improved. Is my recommendation that teeth be given to the parts of the law that allow regulation of providers of interpreting services, not just interpreters who actually do the interpreting. And also to consider maybe that trying to regulate and create legislation around nuanced situations is not the right direction, but perhaps something much more broad would actually fit everything better. That's all.
Thank you, Caitlin. Next, we're going to go to Tiasha since she has not spoken yet.
Okay. Can you see me? Perfect. Hello, everybody. So, one thing I'm thinking about when we're talking about user choice is, with the agency, you know, we have to think about the deaf-blind community. We can't force them to use VRI. It's not even possible. So it's important to take that into consideration. And sometimes it's beyond their control. It can't be 100% fit at the right time. And it can't be the exact right person. But that's all I have for right now. And we're going to switch interpreters.
Thank you, Tiasha. Next, we'll go to Bill. Bill, you can go ahead and come off. There you go.
My apologies. Okay, and so thank you for that. And I wanted to acknowledge Jason's point when it comes to compliance. And it can be challenging to, well, especially for those rural areas. And I had just moved here just last year from Vermont myself. And Vermont, the entire state is rural. So to be able to get an interpreter sometimes would take upwards of 2 to 3 hours to be able to get them. Sometimes we have to call them in the middle of the night. And so imagine Deep Creek Lake, the difficulties they might have out here. How about over here on the Eastern Shore? Um, so yes, we do need to have some sort of balance between, say, the hospital trying to be in compliance, yet failing to be able to do so despite their best efforts. Okay, but yet they still failed, and then we have a hospital say that is in complete negligence of that type of compliance. I know that it's hard for some hearing individuals who don't have a lot of experience within these various interpreting situations to understand and appreciate that oftentimes our requests are suppressed by hospital administrators, um, charge nurses. They'll just say, oh, we don't need the in-person interpreter. We have a VRI interpreter. And they'll say, don't call for one. And then there's a deaf individual that might be sitting there waiting for the interpreter, asking where they are. And they say, oh, well, here's VRI. And they say, I need a live interpreter. And then they try to convince the deaf person, oh, no, you're fine. And they continue to delay this process. And in fact, they've never actually made that phone call or request. And you say, oh, that doesn't happen. Just to let you know, this happens every single day. All deaf people who have had experiences, whether it be families or friends in the hospital, know that this happens every day. Our requests are often overlooked or suppressed. So yes, this is in fact a real problem. So to try and fail and then to never try. Those are, two different things. But I look at both of those and I think to myself, how is it that we're able to balance those two situations out to where they try and fail, or in fact never try, and the never try needs more teeth, right? So, so to have a system for those grievances, and I think that's part of the reg's responsibility is to be able to create this. Um, so now going back to the point, I'm not seeing here any specific recommendations for changes to the legislation or the statutes. I see us discussing things that, say Leslie had indicated that we've already implemented this in the regs, and okay, but we are not here to discuss the regs. We are here to discuss the statutes. Um, so it seems that this discussion and negotiation that we're having here was resolved in the regs. Am I misunderstanding something here? So those are my thoughts, and I thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts, Bill. Next will be Pam Ortiz. I know she wanted to raise her proposal, but is unable to raise her
I'm
hand.
sorry, what was that? What was the other name?
Pam Ortiz from Judiciary.
Thank you, Laura. This is Pam Ortiz with the Maryland Judiciary. I apologize for being off camera, but I'm myself in a hospital today with a family member, so I appreciate your patience. We did submit our proposal in writing, and I just want to speak briefly. I know that I think one of the purposes of this group is to see if we can reach a consensus about changes to the statute. We may or may not be able to do that, but we offer these proposals in the hopes that you'll consider them. In terms of consumer choice, the Maryland judiciary is a very large and complex branch of government. The judiciary, as an independent branch of government, regulates its own activities through court rules. We have an accessibility rule that requires courts to engage in a dialogue with the consumer and to do our best to provide the type of accommodation requested. Courts do have to meet and balance a broad range of needs in making those determinations, which is why the consumer choice provision is very challenging for us. We absolutely want to hear from consumers about the type of service that they believe would best meet their needs. And we have a statewide network of coordinators that help each of our courts in responding to those. And they're required to follow court rules in doing so, as well as the ADA. So it's important that that we be able to know clearly the laws that govern the accommodation work we do. The courts are on-demand services. People come to our courts at all hours of the day and night. We operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. District court commissioners, for example, have individuals brought before them who've been charged with a crime and have to make a determination about public safety. This can happen in any jurisdiction in Maryland, and we need to be able to respond quickly in order to meet not only public safety needs, but we often have statutory deadlines or timelines we must meet in order to make sure that we are applying the law correctly. We also have to preserve the rights of individuals that are before us. And we're not scheduling one-on-one appointments like a dentist appointment. We have to schedule proceedings that involve multiple agencies, including public defenders, state's attorney's offices, that involve witnesses, that involve victims of crime, or that involve both plaintiffs, defendants, their attorneys, and all interested parties, as well as meeting the requirements of the law. So when we are scheduling an interpreter, we have to balance all of those things. We actually have a statewide process. We have a system of finding those interpreters, but it's very challenging. While we want to meet the consumer's needs, there may be exigencies that preclude us from providing the accommodation that's requested in the form it's requested.
I'm sorry, this is the interpreter speaking. This is the interpreter speaking. Your audio is coming in a bit garbled. Could you go back to maybe just one or two sentences prior, please, for the interpreter?
Sure. We have we work very hard to create a statewide system through which our courts can request the interpreters that are needed and make every effort to provide nationally certified interpreters. Anybody serving in our courts is required to hold that national certification. There will be times when we may not be able to provide an in-person interpreter every time. We also have individuals that show up at our counters that need assistance filing, may have questions, may need to meet with a court help center, or are showing up with an urgent need. So there are times outside of the courtroom when we make VRI services available. So the consumer choice provision for the courts is a challenge, and layering on top of the ADA, a statute that requires us to go beyond the ADA, beyond a reasonable accommodation and provide a specific accommodation is where we face a challenge. Our proposal for this provision is very simple, and that would be just to change the word from determined to indicated. We do want to hear from consumers.
I'm
about
sorry,
the
this is the
difference.
interpreter. To change the word determine to what?
Yeah,
Could you repeat that,
and
please?
yes, in subsection B3, change the word determine to indicate. That would allow us to hear from the consumer about their preference, which of course we do already, but would not mandate a specific accommodation, but rather continue to require us to follow the ADA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam. Next to Betty.
Okay, and this is Betty speaking, and I'm going to go ahead and sign. Thank you. And so I do think it's important to talk about the ADA. Okay, so the word in the ADA is qualified. And I don't know the issues about not enough interpreters or not available or hard to get them in person. So all of those issues that were discussed are valid. I do appreciate people and trying to understand their views in terms of the struggles to provide appropriate services. So I have no doubts that people do, in fact, want to provide the best services. So one thing is missing from this discussion, and that is the word quality. And so I've been in the field of interpreter education for almost 50 years, all over the United States, as well as other countries as well. And I'm sad, and I don't enjoy saying this, but the quality of interpreters from when they graduate, or new interpreters, and some that have even been working for many years, is very, very poor. Some deaf people, uh, maybe bilingual or hard of hearing people who prefer English, that's fine. And oftentimes they're able to function fine with captionings, and they may not need an interpreter at all. Okay, which once again is perfectly fine. But the problem is that we don't know this ahead of time. Okay, and so Caitlin's comment seems to indicate that who is it? Not all need ASL. That is correct. But interpreters are supposed to have the ability to interpret into ASL, mixed English, English grammar. So all interpreters are in fact able to do all those assignments. If there's an ASL interpreter that doesn't know ASL at all, they wouldn't have the ability to serve many, many clients. So the problem worsens if they're not certified and the person isn't skilled enough, or say the person is unethical and there's no process to be able to file a complaint against this interpreter. With the certification, they're able to file that ethical practice complaint through the ethics system. Um, so essentially, there's no oversight for those interpreters. So if they complain and they say, "I don't want this interpreter," but this interpreter continues to work in the field, and maybe not realizing that with the passing of the ADA, nobody has bothered to ask, are we able to provide interpreters, say, for this new law? And the answer is no. So what happens is there's a factory of ITPs that get set up, interpreter training programs, and we'll take spoken language interpreting, for example. So programs all over the world won't permit anybody to enter an interpreting program until they've received mastery with at least, say, 2 to 3 languages. Ours is that people go into the program having no sign language skills at all and expecting them to learn complex language and also understand deaf culture and all the nuances that are incorporated with that, as well as learn about interpreting ethics, professionalism, and so on and so forth within 4 years. That is not possible. So that is the reality. And so I think that it is important to talk about the scheduling and, interpreters showing up. It is important, but a warm body is not accessibility. A warm body is not an accommodation. And so we do have to face that. And I think, and I'm hoping that one part of this process is to where we start to realize that there's not enough interpreters, there's not enough skilled interpreters, and we need to invest in proper training to be able to help raise their skills to where they're able to provide accommodations to a wide variety of deaf individuals, and that will provide better continuity going forward. So I think it's important for us to be able to face that fact. It is sad, but at the same time, it's also true, and I thank you. I'm going to switch interpreters.
Thank you so much, Betty. And we are now at 2 o'clock. Jason did have his hand up, so we'll round out with Jason, and then we'll close out.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I want to take the opportunity to talk about Tiasha's comment previously about deaf-blind. The ADA is clear that VRI is not appropriate for a deaf-blind person. The foundation is already there. And I know the real world, people will go ahead and bring in VRI. They just don't know. But we here, we're running under the understanding that we realize the consumer obviously needs to have effective communication. That's one thing. I just want to make a mention of that in terms of that comment. The other thing I wanted to say is, I'm reading the proposals, and I believe one proposal mentioned consumer choice seems to be a bit confused with picking who the interpreter is. And that's not my understanding. My understanding is you choose which modality you want, in person or VRA. So technology or an actual person. That's my understanding of the law. And that's the goal. So I just want to make sure and have this out there that everything is understood, and maybe I'm wrong. But again, I just wanted to recognize and the differences between these two and how we can have this discussion.
Alrighty, thank you all so much for your time today. We are now a little bit over, so we want to make sure that we're respectful of everyone's time. If you have any additional comments, please feel free to share them via email, and we can, discuss them at the next meeting. So please prepare your proposals for the next discussion topics. Let me just pull them up. So that would be specialties, board membership, board meetings, and reporting requirements. We will continue today's conversation next meeting. We didn't get too much into the licensure requirements and all of those pieces, but we'll pick up. But we still want to make sure that you all send over those proposals so that we are already in a rhythm and we can move through these meetings quickly. So thank you all so much for your time again. Thank you so much for your participation. Again, feel free to reach out, share any questions, concerns that you have. We're happy to receive them offline. Thank you so much. Have a good one.